Hello, Tri-Cities, and welcome to the 2020 Candidate Forum, the only region-wide business-focused candidate forum in the Tri-Cities, brought to you by the Tri-City Regional Chamber of Commerce. In this forum, you'll be hearing from the candidates running for the Washington State House of Representatives 9th Legislative District, Position 1. I'm Scott Daniels, news anchor for KNDU. I'm pleased to be with you. Early voting starts as ballots will begin appearing in mailboxes October 13th and runs through Election Day, Tuesday, November 3rd. Thank you for joining us to hear the candidates' thoughts on issues that matter to the Tri-Cities community. And now a message from the President and CEO of the Tri-City Regional Chamber of Commerce, Lori Madsen.
As the foremost advocate and voice for business, the Tri-City Regional Chamber of Commerce leads by advancing policies and positions that strengthen, preserve, and promote a thriving business climate, economy, and quality of life. The 2020 candidate forums are designed to highlight how candidate positions integrate with local business priorities. I'd like to take a brief moment to thank the Chamber's Board of Directors and Local Government Affairs Committee for their leadership in supporting our advocacy efforts. I'm especially pleased and grateful for the support of the candidate forum sponsors, Cascade Natural Gas, GISA Credit Union, JLH Group, and Hayden Homes. And last but not least, a very special thanks to our local news partners for collaborating on this project. Your time, talent, and expertise are valued and truly appreciated.
Thank you, Lori. It is a pleasure to serve the community by providing opportunities for voters to become better informed about the people who are running for public office. Now to the format. Each candidate will have 1 minute for opening and closing statements. The candidates will be asked the same questions. Response time for each question is limited to 2 minutes. Time limit reminders will appear on screen at 10 seconds remaining, and if necessary, when time is up. Since this is a forum, candidates will not be provided rebuttal time. We are now ready to get started. Let's begin by introducing in alphabetical order the two candidates in the race for Washington State House of Representatives 9th Legislative District, Position 1. Brett Borden is challenging the incumbent Representative Mary Dye. Welcome to you both, and thank you very much for taking time to be with us. We appreciate both of you. So if you're ready to go, let's get started. As mentioned, we will start opening statements in alphabetical order. So Mr. Borden, we will begin with your opening statement. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. I'm Brett Borden. I'm treasurer for the Libertarian Party of Washington. I'm a former business owner and now work in manufacturing. I am running so voters have a choice. Like all libertarians, I am also running to see a world set free in our lifetimes. A world where people can live as they wish without harming other people, without being controlled by powerful entities like the government. I am a supporter of individual liberty for all, limited government that works for people and not the powerful. I am a regular guy with civic interest. I'm seeking a role in our citizen legislature to be a voice, first of all, for the people, for all residents, not just a base. In casting off our old partisan baggage, we can embrace a positive future for freedom. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Borden. Representative Dye, you now have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Thank you so much to the Tri-Cities Regional Chamber of Commerce for hosting this opportunity to discuss the interests of the people in business community in Tri-Cities and also the people that work and live here and enjoy the benefits. You know, my job is to believe in what is possible. And even though on the West Side politics seemed to have dominated this last session, we were able to find common empathy for my constituents and for the constituents of Eastern Washington. One of the biggest issues was broadband, and it became an equity issue for the people over there, realizing that people in rural communities had been left behind. For us, it was a critical economic issue. We have water infrastructure needs in our district, and it became an environmental issue because it is to save a depleted aquifer, and yet for us, it's a true economic development engine. I also worked on prison reform, and it was for developing wild horse. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Dye. Let's now move right into the question and answer portion of this forum. The coin toss just prior to this taping has determined that Ms. Dye will answer the first question and then alternate it for subsequent questions. Question one. This has been a year like no other. Our state has been struggling with the coronavirus, economic downturn, severe unemployment, civil unrest, and catastrophic wildfires. How should the legislature address the gaping hole in the state budget? Ms. Dye, you are first for this question.
It would have been easier had we been able to go into a special session early before the fiscal year began in July to be able to stop some of the additional spending that we added onto the burden the taxpayers on the budget. But unfortunately, we weren't unable to accomplish that. We've been calling for a special session ever since. If in fact we can get in to stop some of the programs that maybe the pain will be less. But if we wait until January, the pain will be great because we'll go through the regular budgeting process, and those budget bills won't come out until later in the spring and execute in the fiscal year coming 21-23. If we do that, those cuts are going to be much more significant. We have the opportunity with our rainy day fund to use it for this emergency, and our hole in the budget is not as severe as been stated. But if we can't get in there early, we can't make those cuts, and it will be extremely painful as we go into this next legislative session to fill that hole in the budget.
Thank you, Ms. Dye. Mr. Borden, let me ask you the same question. This has been a year like no other. Our state has been struggling with the coronavirus, economic downturn, severe unemployment, civil unrest, and catastrophic wildfires. How should the legislature address the gaping hole in the state budget?
Yeah, I tend to agree there. The spending has continually grown over the past 10 years, and I think it's time to start reining some of that in and have more local controls. The tendency to keep going for state control on more and more things build more bureaucracy. We get less return for the problems that they're meant to address. We have gone through a lot of things this year. I think the high priorities for things that should be kept should be on things like emergency response for things like social safety net, just to make sure that we're minimizing how hard people have it. But on a lot of these other things, it just keeps growing and growing. And I think it's time that we have to start being a little more prudent with our tax dollars.
Thank you, Mr. Borden. Ms. Dye, you're up first for this question. If you had the opportunity to change, hold on, excuse me, Mr. Borden, you're first for this question. If you had the opportunity to change the BNO tax without lowering or eliminating it, what changes would you make and why? Again, Mr. Borden, you are first for this question.
Sure. If without lowering or eliminating it, I think one of the good changes that came about for the BNO tax, I believe it was in this last session, was that they changed from the transaction limit to $100,000 business in Washington threshold. One of the things that I like about the BNO tax is that it has that exception for small business. So we aren't kind of forcing smaller and more, likely independent, vulnerable businesses to be bearing their undue brunt. In that vein, I would like to raise that threshold if we're talking without lowering or eliminating it. I think that would be the best way.
Thank you, Mr. Borden. Ms. Dye, let me repeat the question. If you had the opportunity to change the BNO tax without lowering or eliminating it, what changes would you make and why?
The BNO tax was broadened this last session by adding services, and that created a larger tax base. So the need to expand the BNO seems limited. However, in that, a couple of our largest firms who said they felt that they needed to pay more put a cap on that bill. And so in that regard, it still ends up being somewhat of a preference, a tax preference for those largest firms that stated that they wanted the BNO. The BNO tax expansion was also earmarked to add an entitlement, a new entitlement. And my question is there any way that we can change that format to change that so that more of that added revenue would be distributed more fairly to fill some of the consequences? Also, the entitlement, it becomes a question as well during COVID, since our universities have been really impacted on how they're able to operate. And the question is, are our students getting full value of their university education given the limitations on access to classroom time? And so I think those conversations need to be had. In terms of the B&O tax, it's a gross sales. And so if you are profitable or not, that is a question. And I feel like those questions need to be brought to the table and really evaluated from a more of a policy philosophical level.
Thank you, Ms. Dye. Next question. There are discussions about imposing new statewide taxes, such as a roads usage charge, a capital gains income tax, a Seattle-based payroll tax, a tax to pay for childcare, wildfire prevention and response tax, and a carbon tax. Do you support any of these taxes? Why or why not? Ms. Dye, you are up first for this question.
I think it's very foolhardy, given what we've experienced this year in our private sector businesses, to burden them with additional taxes to pay for what really was a government mandate to shut down business operations. It seems like a double penalty. And I just feel that, there are ways that we can handle the shortfall if we're wise and prudent without burdening additional taxes. Any of these proposed taxes will actually not gain the revenue that one would project, because it will hamper businesses' ability to recover. Right now in hospitality, we're looking at a 30% shutdown of all of our in-seating restaurants. We're looking at significant impacts in a number of our important business sectors that they will not recover. And adding taxes, while it sounds like that is simple, straight line, linear thinking to get additional revenue, the math doesn't add up, because you will disincentive people staying in the state, and you'll also create an economic environment where people simply cannot sustain their business practices and recover what they've lost. What we need to do is to use the rainy day fund and try to find cuts with the remainder that are across broad scale, across the board, for agencies to find those places where they can find savings. Every business has to do that during downturns. They have to find savings in their operations and become more efficient. And I think it's time that our government should be required to do the same.
Thank you, Ms. Dye. Let me repeat the question for Mr. Borden. There are discussions about imposing new statewide taxes, such as a roads usage charge, a capital gains income tax, a Seattle-based payroll tax, a tax to pay for childcare, wildfire prevention and response tax, and a carbon tax. Do you support any of these new taxes? Why or why not?
No, I don't. I think that this is a foolhardy time to echo Representative Dye's comments, to be just increasing the tax burden on our people and our businesses. Taxes by nature are regressive. We already have a regressive tax structure. A place like Seattle are driving working people out. They're coming to Spokane. they're coming to Tri-Cities. This keeps happening because this high tax burden is driving out regular people. And after forcing business closures all year, to then expect that our businesses are going to have to be taking on this higher tax burden and all the negatives in, cost of living, things like this come along with it, is really misguided. Things like roads usage. I mean, we already have one of the highest, if not, I think it is the highest gas tax, and I don't think we're getting our money's worth on that. It's building this bureaucracy. It's not getting the job done. We need to start talking about devolving from the state to our more local jurisdictions to start solving these problems of society and quit expecting federal and state government to just be solving everything.
Thank you, Mr. Borden. Final question here. Do you see the benefits of career-focused education and skills training programs? And if so, how do you believe the legislature can best support them? Mr. Borden, you are first for this question.
Okay, that was coming through garbled, so I'm going to take a sec to read it. I see the benefits of within education to have more trade training because of its practical use. I totally support more broad options in education that would equip people better than just necessarily going to college. The legislature, I think, can best support by increasing local control. When it comes to this education and teaching skills, more local control, I think you're going to have a product, an educational product that better suits the area where these students would be learning these things. You could, out in Southeast Washington, having more training in agriculture would be a hell of a lot more beneficial than just doing, well, Olympia says this, so that should be the case everywhere. I think left to our local communities, that we would be able to make these calls better than the legislature necessarily just mandating something.
Thank you, Mr. Borden. Ms. Dye, I'm going to repeat the question. Do you see the benefit of career-focused education and skills training programs? And if so, how do you believe the legislature can best support that?
Well, I certainly think that Tri-Cities has a tremendous example in Delta School, and also the charter school initiative that passed. It gives parents more choice. I think really it comes down to giving more. I think after COVID has really reformatted our focus on education, and I think that there's opportunity within that disruption to really create a lot larger menu of options for our communities and our parents to seek education that fits their family's need. We do need to be family focused and help give kids the vision forward, what it's for, instead of the Olympia only top down, you must learn these things, test on them and come out of the system. It's not inspiring people to really find their giftings, their talents. And when you see the light in the eyes of the kids that did win to get to go to Delta School, and you see their enthusiasm for the education that they're receiving, I think that all schools should instill that in our students. And I think we're missing the mark because we have too much control from OSBI and not nearly enough input from the local community. I agree with my opponent on that. And I think that the key people should be at the table are the parents, and letting the parents really help partner with the schools to find those educational resources that they see valuable for their children and the community and the culture that we live in.
Okay, thank you both. This closes the question and answer period. We'll end the forum with closing statements. Since Mr. Borden opened, we'll begin closing statements with Ms. Dye. Representative Dye, you have 1 minute.
Thank you again for giving us this opportunity. You know, we've experienced a great deal of disruption, and I have to compliment the Chamber and your members for their resiliency and their innovation and creativity during these hard times. I have to say that Tri-Cities has done a remarkable job. The employment drop was significant, and now you've exceeded the employment pre-COVID. And that says a lot in spite of the fact that we're only in phase 1. I have to say that it is the private free market that is the answer to the problems that we're experiencing. And I want to create policies that will help facilitate your ability to be successful in the future, whether it's to keep a handle on taxes, to reduce the burden of government, and to reduce the programs that you're expected to pay for. And you know, it's ironic that we find ourselves, but I thank you so much for everything that you do to inspire all of us for our future in Washington State.
Thank you, Ms. Dye. Mr. Borden, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to everybody who's going to be tuning in on this. You know, for too long in this state, in this country, we've been doing the same thing. Here in Washington, Eastern Washington votes Republican, the state votes Democratic. Nothing seems to change but more division. 2020 is just where we've gotten from this repeating cycle of partisanship. I'm an outsider, not beholden to interests nor the political system. If elected, I'm going to stand for everybody's rights. That's what being a libertarian is all about. Your freedom is my priority. I'm Brett Borden, 9th District Libertarian candidate, and I would be honored if you would vote for me. Thank you.
All right, Mary Dye and Brett Borden, thank you very much. We appreciate you taking time to be with us for the Tri-City Regional Chamber's 2020 Candidate Forum featuring candidates running for the Washington State House of Representatives 9th Legislative District, Position 1. As we begin the countdown to Election Day on November 3rd, please remind your friends in the 9th Legislative District to watch, share, and get out the vote. You can find this video and other candidate forum videos on the Tri-City Regional Chamber website at www.tricityregionalchamber.com. Again, thank you to the Chamber, KNDU, the candidates, and the sponsors, Cascade Natural Gas, ESA Credit Union, JLH Group, and Hayden Homes, and especially to all of you for watching. This is Scott Daniels, KNDU News, reminding you to vote.